This is CS 124, Lesson 1.2, Input and Variables. Up to this point, you should already know how to write a simple program and how to display text and numbers to the screen. Today we're going over basic data types and which data types to use in what situation. You'll also learn how to declare a variable and how to accept and store user input from the keyboard. If we're going to use variables, we need to understand what they mean for programming. A variable is a named location in memory where data is stored. You'll see that there are two parts to this, the name and the data. The name of a variable should be specific so that you know what it's storing and how to use it. Data is stored in a computer's memory. As you may know, a computer's memory is in binary, meaning it's a collection of zeros and ones that represent numbers and text. We can manipulate these zeros and ones to store the information we need using data types. Today we're going to discuss 4 basic data types, but please note that there are some data types that this video will not cover. The first data type we'll discuss is type int. Int is the keyword used to declare a variable, which we'll talk more about later, and is short for integer. An integer is a whole number, which means no fractions or decimals, but it can be positive or negative. In memory, an int is 4 bytes long and is useful for containing and storing whole numbers. An int is declared by adding the keyword int just before the variable name. Here we see 2 ways of initializing an int called num. Both ways accomplish the same task. When you create an int, if you don't know what its value is yet, it should be initialized to 0, like this. A float is a data type that can hold decimals. There are 3 types of floating point numbers: a float, a double, and a long double. See your text for more information on the difference between these 3 data types. Floating point numbers are all capable of storing decimals, unlike an int. Floats are declared just like ints, but using the keyword float, double, or long double instead of int. Another common data type is a character, or char. Chars hold a character that corresponds to a single letter, number, or symbol. Notice that the character you want char to hold must be declared in single quotes. A bool, or Boolean variable, can only be true or false. For this reason, it only takes 1 byte in memory. This is useful for values like passing or failing a class, alive or dead, LDS or not, where a person either has a characteristic, such as being alive, or does not, meaning they're dead. Let's practice making a few data types. We'll create a student account for a student in a class. First of all, they need a student ID. This would be good to use an integer for because it has to be a whole number. The easiest way to declare it is right after we initialize it. They also need a number grade. That's good for a float because it may have decimal points. With their number grade, they need a corresponding letter grade, which would be stored in a char because it's a character. Finally, we need to know if they're passing the class. This makes a great Boolean value because either they're passing the class, making the Boolean true, or they're failing the class, making it false. I've put together a quick display, which outputs our student ID, their grade, letter and then number, and pass-fail. If they're passing, we'll see a 1. If they're failing, we'll see a 0. As you can see, all the values that we stored were output, as expected. You're probably wondering why a char is even useful if it only holds 1 letter at a time. We can create a collection of chars so that multiple characters come together to form words and phrases. This is called an array of characters. To do this, Note that we put a set of brackets immediately after the variable name. Inside of the bracket, you store the maximum number of characters in that string. Also, note the double quotes that indicate the text, instead of single quotes indicating a character. If we go back to our student example, we might use our string of characters to give the student a name. That way we know who is actually passing or failing the class. 256 is usually the standard number for array size. If you're not sure exactly how much space you're going to need, 256 is the best number to put in. Now we'll add a quick output. Alright, and I think with that we're ready to go. We now have the command to output student name, our variable, student name, and then a new line. So now we have their name, ID, grade, letter, and number, and pass-fail. Now that we understand how to store information, it's time to learn how to get information from the user. Just as we use cout to output data, we can use cin to read in data. We will also begin using an extraction operator instead of an insertion operator. Once you get input from the user, it has to be stored somewhere. The name of the variable you want the data stored in should follow immediately after the extraction operator, like the age variable here. Cin can be used with any data type. Once again, let's return to our student example. Let's say we wanted a different name on this account. This is the hard-coded value, but we want to prompt the user for a new value. So what we do is we tell them what we want by using a cout statement. And then we read it back in using cin, the extraction operator, followed by the variable we want to read the information into. So let's call our student Jane Gordon. You'll notice that it didn't read after the space. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but for the meantime, we now have a new name matching our other information. Now that you know how to use text, you need to know how to read in a whole line. As we just discovered, cin will only read until it reaches a space, so everything after the space gets lost or truncated. To fix this, we can use the command getLine. GetLine reads until it finds the end of a line. When using getLine, you must put the variable that you want the new information going into first inside the parentheses, followed by the maximum numbers of characters the phrase can have. We can use what we just learned about getLine to fix the problem we had with losing the last name we were entering. We still use the cin command. Then we add getLine and the variable we want our new data to go into, so student name, and then the maximum number of characters it can have. Typically, this number and this number should match. And this time we read in the whole line, which is exactly what we wanted to accomplish. As you can see, being able to read in and store data is very valuable. You do it every day when you run Microsoft Word, email, all of those things take information from you, store it, and then do something with it.